The sheriff had not expected to see anyone in the house, and when she opened the door, she was shocked. What did the woman say next? The sheriff's worst nightmare. Stay till the end of the video to find out what it was. The sun shone brightly through the windows into the cozy living room where Louise sat on the sofa with a cup of tea. It was a beautiful day, and Louise decided to spend it outside in her garden. She put down her tea and went out. Her gaze fell on the old wooden chest that stood in the corner of the garden. She walked over to it and opened it. Every summer Louise liked to take some time to go through old things that had been passed down from her grandmother. There were all kinds of things in the chest. At first glance, it looked like random things, but there was a strange order to it all. Louise pulled out an old photo album. She opened it slowly and began looking at the yellowed photos. There were photos of people she didn't know. Some of them looked like they were from the 1940s or 50s, but there was one picture in particular that caught her eye. On it was a beautiful woman in a police uniform. Louise had never seen this woman before, and she couldn't help but wonder who she was. As Louise delved deeper into the photo album, she found more pictures of the woman in uniform. In some photos, she stood next to men in similar uniforms. They were all smiling at the camera, but one photo in particular sent a shiver down Louise's spine. In this one, the woman in uniform was standing in front of a house. The house looked oddly familiar for some reason. As Louise continued to flip through the photos, she noticed something strange. Most of the photos of the woman in uniform were taken outside or in places where other people could easily have been present. Yet none of the pictures showed any people except for the woman in uniform herself. It almost felt as if the woman had deliberately avoided being photographed with anyone else. But there was another detail in the photos that bothered Louise even more. In most of the photos, the woman's face was either partially or completely obscured by shadows or turned away from the camera. As Louise stared at the back of the woman's head in one of the photos, she realized that there was something strange about it. It was the same hairstyle as Louise's own. Louise ran her fingers through her shoulder-length brown hair. The hair in the photo was longer, but the style was identical, and then it hit her. This woman in the uniform must have been related to her somehow. But how? Louise continued her search through the old chest and finally found an old diary. Its leather cover was worn and the pages inside were brittle and yellowed with age. As Louise read the faded handwriting, she discovered that the diary belonged to her grandmother. She remembered her grandmother telling her stories about her job as a police officer, but she never went into detail. Now, Louise was holding her grandmother's actual diary in her hands. With each page she turned, she learned more about her grandmother's life as a police officer. The entries told of long hours, dangerous situations, and the emotional toll that being a police officer took on a person. But there was one entry in particular that stood out. The date was July 1952. Today I met the most unusual suspect. He claimed to be innocent, but I could tell he was lying. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Still, something about him bothered me. I couldn't shake this feeling that he was telling the truth. Maybe it was his eyes. They were filled with such deep sadness and despair that it broke my heart. I don't want to believe he's guilty, but the evidence says otherwise. I need to do my duty, no matter how difficult it is. I just wish I knew the truth. Who was this William Hayes? And what had happened to him? Louise wondered as she read her grandmother's words. She couldn't believe that someone she loved so dearly would end up behind bars for a crime he didn't commit. And then Louise came across a faded photograph of William Hayes, the man from her grandmother's diary. She stared at his sad eyes, and the haunting familiarity of his face made her blood run cold. She knew that look. She'd seen it before. In fact, it was the same man she'd seen in all those old photos of her grandmother. The same man whose face was always hidden in the pictures. Suddenly, everything clicked into place for Louise. This must have been her grandmother's partner. But why had they hidden their relationship? Had they been ashamed of their love for each other, or had they been trying to protect themselves? Louise couldn't understand it. At that moment, Louise's phone rang, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was the local sheriff. He had received a call about a possible crime scene at her home. When Sheriff Taylor arrived at the house, she was stunned. She had not expected to find anyone there. The house had been empty for years, as far as she knew. And yet here was a woman sitting on the sofa, as if she had lived there all along. The sheriff couldn't believe her eyes. Who was this woman, and how had she gotten into the house? The sheriff's mind raced. Could this woman be connected to the case she was working on? She had been investigating the disappearance of a young woman named Emily Carter, who had lived in the house 60 years ago. Emily had vanished without a trace, and her family had never given up hope of finding her. The sheriff had been on the case for months, but so far she had found no clues. But now, as she looked at the mysterious woman sitting on the sofa, she couldn't shake off the feeling that this woman knew more than she was letting on. "Ma'am," the sheriff began cautiously, "I'm the local sheriff. Can I ask you some questions about Emily Carter?" The woman on the sofa looked up, her gaze steady and unwavering. "Of course," she replied calmly, as if nothing had happened. "I knew you'd come sooner or later," she said with a faint smile. The sheriff's eyebrows furrowed. How did this woman know that the sheriff was coming? Had she been expecting her? The sheriff hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to say next. But she knew that she couldn't let this opportunity slip by. She had come too far to give up now. "Do you know anything about Emily Carter's disappearance?" she asked cautiously. The woman on the sofa seemed to ponder the question for a moment before replying, "Emily? Oh yes, I knew her well. She was a good friend of mine." The sheriff's heart skipped a beat. Finally, someone who knew something about Emily's disappearance. She leaned forward, eager to hear more. "Can you tell me what happened to her?" the sheriff asked hopefully. The woman on the sofa hesitated again, as if weighing her words carefully. "I'm afraid I can't do that," she said finally. "It's an old case and I don't want to dredge up the past." The sheriff could feel her frustration mounting. How could this woman know something about Emily's disappearance and still refuse to talk about it? "Please," the sheriff pleaded, "I need your help. I want to find Emily's body, so that her family can finally have some closure." The woman on the sofa sighed, as if in defeat. "Very well," she said finally. "But you must promise to keep this between us." The sheriff nodded eagerly. "I promise." The woman leaned forward and whispered something in the sheriff's ear. The sheriff gasped in surprise. What the woman told her was nothing less than a bombshell. The sheriff couldn't believe what she was hearing. How could this be? How could this woman have known so much about the case? When the woman finished her story, the sheriff was stunned. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. The woman had told her that she had been Emily's best friend, and that she had helped her bury the body. But that wasn't the most shocking part. The woman had also confessed to being Emily's killer. The sheriff couldn't believe her ears. Had she really just confessed to a murder that had happened 60 years ago? But as she looked into the woman's eyes, she saw the sincerity and remorse there. This woman was truly sorry for what she had done. "Why did you kill her?" the sheriff asked softly. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "We were arguing and I lost control. I'm so sorry." The sheriff felt a pang of sympathy for the woman. She could see that she was genuinely remorseful. "Where did you bury her?" the sheriff asked, knowing that this was the most important question. The woman closed her eyes, as if reliving a painful memory. "I'm sorry, but I can't remember," she whispered. "It was so long ago." The sheriff sighed. She knew that this woman might not remember, but she had to try. "Please," she pleaded. "It's the least you can do for Emily and her family." The woman seemed to consider the request for a moment. Finally, she nodded slowly. "All right," she said. "I'll do my best." And with that, the woman led the sheriff outside to the old wooden chest in the garden. The sheriff couldn't believe her luck. Could this be the breakthrough she had been waiting for? As the sheriff dug through the dirt, her heart raced with anticipation. Was she finally about to find Emily's body? Just when she was about to give up, her shovel hit something hard. She brushed away the dirt to reveal a small wooden box. The sheriff's heart skipped a beat. Could this be what she was looking for? With trembling hands, she opened the box and gasped in surprise. Inside lay a stack of old photographs and a handwritten letter. The sheriff picked up the letter and began to read. "My dearest Emily," it began. "If you're reading this, it means that I am gone. I'm so sorry for what I'm about to do, but I can't bear the pain of living any longer. You are my soulmate, and even in death we will be together." The sheriff's eyes widened in understanding. She finally understood what had happened. She turned to the photos and gasped in surprise. They were the same photos that the woman in the uniform had kept in the album. But there was one photo in particular that stood out. It was a photo of the two women standing in front of the house. And then it hit the sheriff like a bolt of lightning. This house was the same one that was in the photo. This was the house where Emily had lived, but there was more. The sheriff turned to the woman who had confessed to the murder and saw the same sad eyes staring back at her. The sheriff knew, at that moment, that this woman was not only Emily's killer, but also her partner. The sheriff was stunned. She had stumbled upon a love story that had remained hidden for decades. Emily and her partner had chosen to take their own lives rather than live a life apart. The sheriff couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness for the two women. They had been so deeply in love, but their relationship had been forbidden. As the sheriff stood there contemplating the love story that had unfolded before her eyes, she knew that she had just witnessed something truly special. The bond between these two women had been so strong that it had transcended even death itself.